Hello, and thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
I'm Devin Ewald.
Today we're going to be talking about Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris. I'll start by saying this, and then I'll turn it over to you because I know this is your show. Some movies are the movies that we're talking about on this show most of the time. They're classic American films that are the monoliths of storytelling. They are easily consumed, easily digestible. They are fun, they are entertainments, and then I like to slip in a movie like this where it's something else. And movies like this are usually, given negative connotations like challenging, pretentious, slow-moving.
Oh yeah.
But Tarkovsky, like Terrence Malick, like some of Stanley Kubrick, like Antonioni,
Yeah.
they're films that, while they seem daunting, when you get into them, when you discover what it has to offer and what it's saying, there's just so much to be had. There's so much to be thought about and to ruminate about and to talk about and discuss. And I know that some people would look at a film like this and look at the length of it and look at
the length of the takes,
the film, get to the highway sequence,
right?
Like it's jokingly said that Tarkovsky put in that highway sequence to just deter anyone who would not have the patience.
It's the traffic jam tracking shot in Weekend.
Yeah,
I mean, I love it. You like Close Up, Abbas Kiarostami?
Yep.
The shot on the back of the motorcycle where the sound keeps going in and out of a conversation and it goes on so long. And you're like, wow, this is long. But it's so appropriate within the narrative, and really is definitely a test of your patience. But when you realize just that it's about beauty and also the chaos, the clash of chaos and beauty that life is, becomes something else.
He's operating on a completely different level, and some films they come to you, right? Like they're just like, hey, here I am, watch me, I'm great. And some films you have to come to them. You have to tune yourself into them. You have to figure them out. It's not going to tell you what it's about, but it's not as. I'm always surprised at, especially with films of Tarkovsky's and films of Terrence Malick's, for as many times as people say they're confounded by them and they can't figure them out and they don't know what he's trying to say, I'm always surprised because just by sitting down and watching them, they're not as elusive as one might think.
I mean, I think Malick gives you less pieces of the puzzle. His is like an exercise in minimalism to see how little he can explain and just let things happen. And his style influenced people like Linklater with Slacker and different types of kind of. And I feel like with Tarkovsky, I don't think that the screenplay is esoteric. I think it's filled. His dad was a poet. He tries to be a visual poet, so it's going to be poetic.
Yep.
But it's more. I feel like Godard is more experimental in his language of just like kind of using a philosophy quote here and then this and then playful almost. Whereas Tarkovsky, I feel like it's all architected very specifically. And we talked about Wilder a couple weeks ago, and it's the same type of thing. He's truly an auteur because he's a master of the visual medium, but he cares. So he wrote pretty much every film, co-wrote every film he made. And to care that much about the writing of the film and how it fits within this beautiful visual masterpiece that he's creating, as well as the sound too. I mean, I read that he originally did not want any music used in the film and told the composer to just get like ambient sounds. And the composer said, let's kind of like subtly bring in some like orchestral music. And that's how they decided to have the organ. And then I read that, so like, I don't even know if it's really audibly noticeable that it registered with me at all, is that on the Earth sequence, it's all just classical music, and then only when they get to Solaris is it electronic. It's just, I mean, he's providing contrast. In the original novel, it's only on Solaris, and he started it on Earth so that there would be a contrast between the two worlds that he's living in. It's amazing.
I want to ask you how you first came to Tarkovsky and to Solaris. You know, for me, it started with this movie, and it was, so it was 2002 or 2003 when Steven Soderbergh did his version of it, and I remember one of my very outspoken professors at the time, you know, went to go see it, and just, you know, the whole class was just, let me tell you how much of a piece of crap it was and why. And
that's pretentious,
right?
No, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like for someone to call it, yeah.
Well, and it was from the, you know, he was being kind of tongue in cheek about it and saying, like, I don't want to pass him off as that because I did like him, but
right, yeah. Not to call him, but I'm just saying, to just kind of like act like this film is just up, you know, blowing smoke up itself is like really kind of missing the point of the film.
Well, and it came from like loving this movie so much, this version so much, and loving Tarkovsky so much that he was just like, you know, I don't know why Soderbergh decided that he needed to make his version of it, and somehow not really. I think he made the point of it. It's like Danny Boyle making 28 Days Later and not honoring. Not even calling attention to Romero. It was like Soderbergh saying, like, you know, this is my version
of 2001,
and not acknowledging Tarkovsky. But even beyond that, like, I still didn't go to this from that. It was, you know, only time later when I was doing my degree project, and that movie dealt with, like, you know, a person's memory of a past relationship and how it haunts him, and how like the memories fade in and out, and you know, he's having trouble deciphering between reality and the dream world, and one of my other professors at the time said, you know, have you ever seen Solaris? And I'm like, no, I still haven't. And he's like, you should really see it because I bet you would like it a lot. And I did, and it was one of those movies where you watch it and at first you're just like, God, there's so much, and I know I love this because it reminded me of Terrence Malick so much. And I know I loved that philosophical, just shoot everything, and it all of a sudden, like, it just turns into this mosaic, and somehow like the most insignificant shots of nature somehow take on this potent meaning, and you can read so much into it, and that's what I kind of got from it, and the ending haunted me so much.
It's truly a special ending, and you can tell Alex Garland is very influenced by Tarkovsky and that film in particular, because Annihilation ends with a similar type of twist where you're just like, chills you to your core, and the way he pulls it off, it's just this like pull away shot. It's epic on a grand scale, and I think Apocalypse Now might even have been influenced on the way that ended.
Sure.
You know?
And something about that final shot, because, you know, I think right now we kind of take it for granted that well, you just do that with a computer and it can be a very
Right.
seamless shot, right?
Yeah.
But the way he is like, no,
I mean,
this
he
is how I
created
see
the
it.
ocean using different compounds, different. I mean, it's
Different, chemicals and
chemicals
everything.
and dye, and to achieve it.
And that he's using, like, you know, I'll start with one shot that pulls back, and then the smoke will come in, and
master.
that will.
He may be the
Disguise
most
the cut.
impressive executor of, like, pulling off complex imagery ever. I mean, even Hitchcock, even, like, honestly, I think he took it to another level. Because who really can put up all their films and every single one's a masterpiece? Is there a single filmmaker that has this sort of, I don't think, were all of Kubrick's films masterpieces? I mean, you know what I mean?
There's a few that
There's a
you
few
can-
that you could make the case that
Right.
they weren't, and that's normal. This guy was on another level. He's like Jordan status, where you're like, wow, how do you make it look so easy?
Right. And not only that, but any film you can pause anywhere,
And it's a
and
beautiful
it's a painting.
Yeah, he, you know, to get onto, to talk about that real quick, first off, the way he uses color in film is very specific. I've heard stories about how he would just lose it on someone, a crew member, if something was not the color that he specified. Because every color means something, means different kinds of symbolic imagery, makes you feel something different as a human. And he uses green in a lot of those scenes inside that, like, office or parlor room, and it's very calming. It's very, like, and it really offsets the cold metallic kind of feel of the space station, you know? He says, in everyday life, one does not consciously notice colors most of the time. Color should therefore be used in film mainly to emphasize certain moments, but not all the time, for this can distract the viewer. Films in color are like moving paintings or photographs, too beautiful to be a realistic depiction of life.
To defend absurdity is impossible. Anyone who would say, like, you know, this guy just went off on someone because it wasn't the right shade of red.
Right.
Anyone outside is like, well, that he's a lunatic, right? But when you're inside that, it's like, it's gotta be that type of, it's gotta be that red. You don't understand it has a meaning.
You know who was similar to that is Roman Polanski. Because he would do the same thing. I think I mentioned, like, reading Dance Macabre, where it talks about how he calls Ira Levin in the middle of the night and says, hey, what color was this in this room? Because it matters. And then Polanski is an auteur. I mean,
and the thing is like, those are the types of things where if you're watching it with someone, they don't necessarily go, well, yeah, that dress is purple, but if that dress wasn't purple, then it would just be another color, and that it would just be that color.
Yes.
But that it does affect you.
There's
You
plenty
just
of
don't know it.
films where they're grabbing costumes off the costume rack, where it's just not, there's no architecture to really, and meaning behind. It's very interesting because there's so much meaning sometimes to his, it's very similar to art, because there's so much meaning, it feels like sometimes. But then I found out also that he's really a big fan of haikus, because he respects the idea of something only being, it not being about anything but itself, that there is no other. And I think there's so many moments in the film, like the opening shot, the swaying of the reeds and the water, and how you just kind of just appreciate that for just the reality that it is, and you don't, outside of any, what is this leading to? What's next? You know, Malick has plenty of those moments where it's like, just shoot this, because it's there.
And what it impresses me most about shots like that is that you can't direct weeds in the water, right?
Right.
I don't think he can. So he either had to be on a location and see that, and just by seeing it, he's like, this makes me think of this, and this is the perfect image.
I mean, The only thing I can compare him to is Proust. I'm reading Remembrance of Things Past right now, and he's all about memory and navigating the corridors of memory and being able to pull anything from your memory because you're surrendering to it, and bringing up stuff from childhood and connecting it to, and that is just a recurrent theme throughout Tarkovsky's work, and it does. And I wrote down a feeling that I had. I said, watching a Tarkovsky film is an experience that's almost unexplainable because you feel like you're in touch with something ethereal, but also like ever present and like surrounding you, and you don't know what it is. You don't know where you're in a different. It's like being on a different planet. I mean, it's truly transformative.
There's a spirituality to his films, and you know, you can school me because I've only seen Solaris. I've seen Solaris. I've seen Stalker. I've seen Ivan's Child.
Okay. Those are
the
great
three.
ones. Yeah.
But yeah, like every one, it's like you feel like you're watching your own memories because they have such a universality to them, and they're so vivid, and the imagery is so striking.
That's perfectly segues into watching the part where he goes and sees his father towards the end, and then kneels down at him and the embrace. Found out that was inspired by a Rembrandt painting called Return of the Prodigal Son, which is so amazing, just how meticulous he is. But that made me think of Wild Strawberries and Bergman, and then finding out that he's influenced by Bergman, and then after the fact, Bergman himself said, it's just amazing because when someone influences you, but then says, Tarkovsky for me is the greatest director, the one who invented a new language, true to the nature of film, as it captures life as a reflection, life as a dream.
Come on,
I mean, God, it's like, and Bergman was a master of powerful, symbolic, thematic imagery, and beautiful capturing of light and image.
And working with memories and dreams and fantasies, and you know, Ivan's childhood.
Oh God!
The stark imagery of that is like the stark imagery of the Seventh Seal. Like it has a similar type of. What's great about Tarkovsky and even Kubrick and Malick to a certain extent is that they know how to work within. Like I don't think for a single second he was like, you know, oh, I'm making a science fiction movie. This is going to be, you know, this is going to be commercial. This is going to be something that people want to see.
Right.
But I'm going to do it my way. I can't help but make it my way.
Right.
But they have this way of just saying like, I want to make this type of a movie, and I'm just going to do it my way. Like there's no other way they can do it. Like with Ivan's Childhood, it is an Odyssey, Homer-esque type tale of this child going through this horrific event, but seeing it through his innocent eyes.
I mean, it feels a bit like 400 Blows too. I mean, you know, that type of feel to it. There's that one shot in Ivan's Childhood that I'll never forget because he made me feel the filmmaker's ability to reach out and like affect you, where he's sitting in the back of an Apple truck with this girl, and then at the same moment the truck takes off and drives away from the screen, the camera pulls up at the same time. And you're not even quite sure what happened as a viewer. You're like, what just happened? I had to rewind it and see what he did. It's amazing. Oh, real quick, the paintings.
Yep.
I mean, he does the same thing as he takes his time. He doesn't care. He called it sculpting in time. because he believes that you can make your own kind of navigation through reality and make someone experience something. And if you, that's the times when those shots are painful to get through, not in a Tarkovsky film, but in cinema, is when there's no sort of reason for them. I think the reason Gus Van Sant's Jerry was panned, you know, is because, and the reason someone like Bellatar is like considered a genius at what he does is because it's like, well, it's like, are you really, like, what does this mean, and what is it, like, what's the point? And I don't feel like you're ever thinking, what's the point in Solaris?
Yeah.
You know, it's...
you're thinking, what does this mean, and how can I get there?
And then, sure enough, the paintings that he has, all 5 paintings of The Months by Peter Bruegel the Elder from 1565, the 2 that he spends the time really going through are Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. We all know what happened to Icarus, and he tried to get too close to the sun. It's like space exploration, like, come on, it's, you know. And then the other one, Hunters in the Snow, is a depiction of 3 hunters returning from an apparently unsuccessful hunting expedition. And then there's a set of rabbit tracks that they haven't seen. I just like reading the description to that, and it's like, oh, how many people were on the ship, the space station, before Kelvin got there? You know, I don't think any of that was up to chance. I think it's all, yeah.
When did you fall into Tarkovsky?
So, World of Video, I hadn't even really heard his name like that much when I was a young guy, and I had heard about Solaris, and we had a Criterion section, so I saw it, Spine, and I'd be like, oh, maybe I'll take that out sometime. And then I finally did, and I'd really never seen anything like it. And then I just proceeded to watch all of his movies in chronological order from that point in a row. Watched all of them, because there were 7 of them, and we had all of them there. Just like, might as well just like do this. And phew, I'll tell you, man, I wish we could have had my friend Sean Foster on Skype into the show, because he was one of the guys I worked with there, who really smart guy, musician, and film lover, and he really like appreciated just the kind of cinematic language of Tarkovsky, you know. Yeah, each one really just means something different to me, and is really just, he is one of the most profound examiners of the human condition, because, I mean, look what for God's sake, it's like, a film as amazing as 2001 is, he saw something in it that was not like, that was too like clinical and like cold in one hand. He's like, no, this needs to be about people. We need to like feel what it would like to be, because we're losing something. And it really made me question, like, it's almost like a purgatory up there, and you're presented with these recollections that are in real form, that it's like, is this a chance to, it's sort of like Lost, you know? It's like, I wouldn't be surprised if Lost was influenced by this.
Sure,
and this sort of feeling like, is this a chance for me to reconnect with my past in a way and learn from it and some mistakes I made, and maybe try to fix them? Or is it just a mockery of the truth and reality, or is it a bit of both? And anything that brings up those types of questions while you're watching it is profound. And he has some quotes at the end, paraphrasing, just, it's like, love is something you can experience but never truly understand, and that maybe the reason we're here is to be with people, and have that be the reason we love. And just, I mean, to have that happen at that point in the film, it's really masterfully put together, man.
And you mentioned, like you said, purgatory, and you know, the scenes on the space station, and those long winding hallways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked about this because next week we're going to do Alien. And this is, 7 years before it. And
he influenced Ridley Scott.
For sure.
Without a doubt.
Because there's it's so, the silence of it and the look of it and the way that he is positioned in those shots. Alien is always looked at as, well, what he did was it's like a haunted house movie in space.
Right.
And this film, I wouldn't go so far to call it a haunted house movie in space, but there is a haunting element to it, and it's almost like, if Alien is looking at films like Vincent Price haunted house films, then maybe this film is like, the innocence of haunted house films, where it's more about the psychological interior of this person's mind and his own feelings and how haunting and alone that he feels and how detached he feels.
You made me think about two moments in the film. One, first of all, the slow-mo shot. The use of, maybe the only use of slow-mo in the film is when Hari's bloody body is falling through the kind of twisted doorway that she's gotten through, and it's so powerful. It's like he talks about his use of color. It's like everything should be used for a reason. And there's a shot of a reflection, and the way the light captures the reflection of her face on metal is like this, like the picture, the painting, The Scream.
Yeah.
It becomes this like figure 8 type thing that's like horrifying. I just got chills thinking about it. And then the other thing is when Kelvin is being filmed facing, it's really when he's starting to lose his mind, and he's wandering around in like his underwear basically at one point, in his shirt, and wandering aimlessly down the corridor, and then he does a dissolve where into like the back of his head, and now all of a sudden he's walking this way. It's either one or the other, but it reverses, and it's like, it looks like, for a moment it looks like he's lost his head. So I think it's into the back of his head, because basically that's the absence of color there, or just the darkness of his hair makes it look like there's no head, right when he's losing his mind. I mean, that's incredible. And as far as the space station goes, I read that the set designer wanted it to deliberately look decrepit, run down, lived in, because Tarkovsky really wanted it to seem real, and I think that's one of the things he didn't like about 2001, is it just looked so futuristic and pristine and neat. And that's where it's like, well, that's your opinion. 2001 is a great film, Kubrick's a great director, apples and oranges, you're both geniuses. And it says a lot about Kubrick that he loved Solaris, and that it's just like, all right, you don't like my film, but I'm cool enough to like recognize that yours is good, It is really, it's not to get off on a tangent on Kubrick, but it is nice to see how generous he was with liking other people's, he wasn't so, as much of a hermit as he... Film and everything.
Yeah, everything. That lived-in quality of the space station, and that is usually attributed to George Lucas with Star Wars and to Ridley Scott with Alien, that they kind of took this like trucker mentality of space, where like things are rusty, things are old, and it's right here, like he wanted it to look that way. The set designer wanted it to look that way, so that it looked like an old house.
There's did you see Good Time with Robert Pattinson?
No.
There's a shot in it where Robert Pattinson is wearing like this like old like starter coat, like sports jacket, but it's like really dingy and dirty, and you're like, wow, how many directors like think to do that? No, they like get a new coat. You're wearing a new coat. Well, his character wouldn't have a new coat. He's a drug addict. He's walking around like just like losing his, and just like, no, he doesn't have a new coat. He's, and I think to think about stuff like that is truly Tarkovsky-esque. He's one of the main people to provide that sort of insane attention to detail, you know?
Do you know that with the, I'm sure you do, but with Hari, he wanted to cast his
ex-wife. Yeah. I just love the way all that stuff comes together, you know? It's like, I guess he originally auditioned this actress and then thought she was too young. Then he recommended her to another director. She starred in that film, and then he saw that film, and he's like, wait a minute. No, she's the one. It's pretty sad, but I read that she admitted in an interview that she fell in love with him during the filming of this, and then when their relationship ended, she became suicidal because, and actually attributed it to her character and the circumstances. Just kind of shows the power of being in an experience like that, and probably with him as a filmmaker, you know. I read that Tarkovsky and his cinematographer would spend 2 days preparing to set up a single long take, and then due to that intense preparation, they usually only just needed one take. They would like do one takes. It's like, I mean, it's amazing, man. Then I found out that they argued so much that they never worked together again. And he shot all his every film up to Solaris. So, who knows? Maybe he wasn't the easiest person to work with. I don't know. He probably. It's funny because I think Wells talks about how he hates like long takes like that, like films like Antonioni and stuff. But I feel like they probably were pretty similar in what they were trying to achieve.
Right.
You know.
And how they went about it.
Right.
She's cast very well. I mean, if you're going to be haunted by someone and by a relationship and by a love, like, you know, it's she has that right look. And one of my favorite books is What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson, and I know it was turned into a movie, but it wasn't the book. And I think this film is closer to the ideas of this film are closer to the book by Richard Matheson, and I've always wanted to see that into a movie. And I felt like he would have been the right director to do it. But the ending and how it's constructed and how it leads to it and how he wanted it makes you rethink the beginning, and it has this elliptical feeling to it in construction. How do you see the ending? Like,
I mean,
is it haunting? Is it depressing? Or is it hopeful?
I think it's extremely haunting.
I mean, it freaked me out when I saw it the first time.
I mean, it'd been so long since I saw it that I forgot what the ending was. And I got lulled into thinking he was back on Earth. I'm like, oh, there's his dad, but why is it raining
on him?
And why is it hot? Why is there heat? Why is there like heat vapors rising from the water as it's falling on him indoors? I love that I'm reading like Tarkovsky's like predominant themes, you know, raining indoors, just as like in multiple films. He was like, I would love to hear why he liked to do that, like what it meant to him, this kind of dream world. Two things. Bergman talks about when he discovered Ivan's childhood. He says, my discovery of Tarkovsky's first film was like a miracle. Suddenly I found myself standing at the door of a room, the keys of which had until then never been given to me. It was a room I had always wanted to enter, and where he was moving freely and fully at ease. And a guy like that, to really revere someone. And then he really didn't like commercial cinema, but I read that he praised the Terminator. He says, its vision of the future and the relation between man and its destiny is pushing the frontier of cinema as an art. He was critical of the brutality and low acting skills, in quotes, but was nevertheless impressed by the film.
That was Tarkovsky on
Tarkovsky on Terminator. You don't expect to hear that one, but just kind of shows the duality of a guy like Cameron, where it's like, it's not just all popcorn films for him.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot going on in The Abyss and Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's powerful that a guy like this, that made films like this, ended up probably influencing filmmakers that weren't even like him as filmmakers. It's like, it's a sort of, it's like what Bergman touches upon, of like there's like a new language. He created like a new way of, it's like Rakim in hip hop. He created like a new, rappers were like, hey, because I can't, like there was like a different, and he like looked at it like a musician, like I'm gonna rap, so I'm gonna phrase things on the beat like I'm playing an instrument. He changed the way people rap.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing here.
It always, because like there's Tarkovsky films, and then there's no one else like Tarkovsky. So whenever I see, like you will see a Tarkovsky type moment, and it's even like in TV shows and in other directors' movies,
Mm-hmm.
where sometimes it even seems like disingenuous, because it's just like, oh, they're just, this isn't the same thing. It's just they're taking a moment like that and just making it work for them. But I don't know, like it always feels weird. Like I love Tarkovsky and I love Terrence Malick so much,
Mm-hmm.
but then you try to do like a Terrence Malick type thing, and you're just like, no, I can't, because I'm not Terrence Malick.
Right.
They just see the world in their own way, and they see movies in their own way.
And I think Tarkovsky, he cared so much about what came before him, about preserving the idea of a historical kind of predecessor to inform what you're doing. That's why he would include paintings and different kind of things in his work, because it's like he respected art so much that he didn't think of cinema as cinema was to him like a relatively new art form. That I was reading his 10 favorite films, and it's like a lot of Bresson on there, and Bergman, and Seven Samurai, and the only one from the silent era is City Lights. And he was quoted as basically saying that cinema didn't really find its place as film, as art, until it's like that. All that was just like a preface to, and only relatively recently has that started to happen, which is like, when you hear that and you think of people like Murnau, and it's like it's quite a statement, right? But there's some validity to his words when you think about how he truly did change the way a film can feel, I
mean, Stalker has its own look.
Well, he thought that he considered Solaris an artistic failure because he thought he didn't transcend the genre the way he did with Stalker. That he got caught up in having to have technological dialogue and special effects, and with Stalker he just got to make his own film. And Stalker truly feels like nothing ever. The look of it, the feel, it's surreal. it's scary. I mean, his final two films, because it was Stalker and Sacrifice,
Yep.
right, are haunting. I mean, no wonder he loves Cameron. Like, doesn't not love Cameron, but no wonder he was enamored of the Terminator. I mean, he really is trying to like reach through the screen and say like, "Hey guys." One of the lines he says, "Shame. That's the only way to save mankind, is if people can start to, you know." And I think it's relevant to this day. It's like, got to think about what we're doing here and the choices we're making and what we consider. You know, there's alternate stances throughout this film about the role of science and technology and things like that. And it's like, you know, one guy's saying, well, knowledge is pointless if it's not moral. And then I think it's Kelvin that responds, the other person responds and says, well, morals has no place in, basically science dictates what morals it has. Remember Hiroshima, you know? And it's like, just, I really like how it's not just, hey, this is how I feel about something. He really tries to make you think about what's being discussed and have sort of a panoramic analysis of it.
Yeah.
You know, like he really respects just like people and their stories, and it matters. And read that he was heavily influenced by Japanese cinema because he really loved, especially Mizoguchi, but Kurosawa as well, and loved the way all the characters just felt like they had their own kind of thing going on, like, and how even just like something like slicing bread with a sword like would become like its own thing. And it's interesting because it's like, oh, those are Tarkovsky, those would become Tarkovsky moments.
Yep.
The haiku, it's like, this doesn't mean, it can mean whatever you want it to mean, but it's the same thing as a painting. He really is trying to achieve having a film feel like you're looking at a painting and not in just shots looking like paintings. No, everything a painting means, what happens to you when you're looking at something someone took all this time to put on a canvas. It's the same thing.
And noticing the details that are just layered within it.
Yes. It's truly astonishing. I mean, this is a guy you really could make the case for best filmmaker of all time. You really could. I mean, it all depends on what your idea of, you know, what it means, you know, and how entertaining you think a movie should be, or what you consider entertaining, or your toleration for dialogue that's not just like, you know, cookie cutter designed to get a story across, you know? And I think that's why, you know, he's one of those guys that you say Tarkovsky and not necessarily everyone knows who that is. I mean, film lovers do, but it's not the same as a lot of these other filmmakers, unfortunately, you know?
It's a shame because I feel like there's so many films and so many filmmakers that don't transcend the film, you know, the film lover or the people who studied film or are filmmakers, and like there's films that, you know, anyone will love, and then there's some films that it's just they can't break that barrier. It's like they're only for people who love movies.
Right.
And it's always so like frustrating because they never feel to me like, you know, what do you mean you don't know what he's trying, don't you see that?
I know. Well, because you have to really care. When you put on one of these movies, if you're watching it with someone who isn't like greedily like absorbing every ounce of detail that's on the screen and taking in a line that's profound and thinking about it and being like, whoa, like how do I process that? Wait, what's going on now? And I mean, then it's not for them, you know? If you just want, I mean, yeah, there's nights I get home and I just want to throw on, you know, I joked about like Con Air on another episode. It's like I just want to throw on like something like that and just watch it. But then you definitely have to be in the mood to watch a film like this.
Right.
It is an experience. It's not just a movie, you know. Film as art. And it's what he wanted to do, and he was very successful at it.
What are some of the things that you think were influenced by Tarkovsky or this film just in general?
I mean, I talked about Garland, definitely, Ex Machina and Annihilation. I mean, Ex Machina, just the whole idea of her he's like, am I human? You know?
Right.
And that sort of just air of like insanity that Oscar Isaac has. It's like, oh, how, like, you know, what's going on? And just having Gleason as sort of like the Kelvin character coming in and being, you know, in Annihilation, I mean, there's in Solaris, they call it the Annihilator that is going to like nuke the ocean, right? And then also the Shimmer. On the Shimmer, the ocean, it's like this kind of like incomprehensible alien presence that's affecting the human psyche, right? I mean, and definitely, you know, Scott with Blade Runner and Alien, as well as, I mean, if you really just started thinking about it, you could probably identify a lot more. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you'd mentioned Lost, and I'm like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You know, I know Christopher Nolan has said Stellar was, it was one of the films that he had thought about. And I guess Jonathan Nolan said that this was an influence on their version of Westworld, which I still can't get into.
With Interstellar, I actually like the film, and I kind of defend it to people that bash it for certain reasons. But Nolan's definitely a guy that, like, it's like even if he is influenced by Tarkovsky, it's like he clearly has a different approach to like making a movie, right? He's a little more like, let's just put this, like, I don't know. He makes beautiful films to watch. But
right. He's a lot more like Cameron, where it's like, you know, there are little things that he's pulling from it, but it's his.
But it's about entertaining people.
Yes. Yeah.
And
you know, with Cameron, it's got to be, you know, those little interstitial moments in the future when it's like the wasteland. Like when we were talking about like that's like the zone in Stalker, right? Because Stalker has like this like, is it post-apocalyptic? Is it future? Like it's like its own thing, and then it has like this kind of, it's like this Chernobyl type vision of a desolate Earth. And then I read that it was before Chernobyl even happened. Like it was referencing some other disaster that had happened, and then right when it came out, that's when Chernobyl happened. Wow. And they called that the zone because of that movie.
Wow. You know, it's pretty crazy that I was reading that there's conspiracy theories that Tarkovsky was assassinated by the KGB, and there are former KGB agents that have testified that an order was given to kill him because of his anti-Soviet propaganda. And there have been multiple reports. It's not even just like a thing on the, you know, floating through the internet. This is like substantiated. He died of lung cancer, but one of his doctors said there's no way this type of cancer could have happened from. There's no way his form of cancer could have happened from natural causes, apparently. So whether you can think the idea that you could like get someone sick and actually like get, I don't know.
Wow.
But then finding out that he, his wife, and one of the actors from Stalker all died of the same type of lung cancer, and one of the people who worked on the film believe that it was because they shot at this chemical plant. Just interesting.
It's like an Oliver Stone film.
This guy's life is just, you know, it's like, just seemed to have a very interesting existence, you know, and just processing it in the way he did. It's really inspiring.
His movies for me are not movies you see once and it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Like
Right.
you want to go back to it. Like there's moments in this film that I want to, you know, every now and then I'll just think of them. It's like, oh, I want to watch that moment again. But then you're like, no, I can't just watch the moment. I got to watch the whole thing. Stalker is going to be a film like that because, like I told you last week, it's like I started that film watching it on my phone, and I'm like, I can't watch this movie on my phone. So then I did it proper on my TV. But
there's a moment I just remembered when Burton, the pilot, is given his testimony in the beginning of the film. Right at the point where he says everything started to crack and break, this guy sitting in the background clinks his coffee cup, and it distracts Burton, and he turns around right when he's in this emotional remembrance of being, he's retelling, and he turns around and stops talking, and then turns back around. It's like, what? How did that moment happen? And it's just amazing to like think about how you could, we'll have something sounding like it's breaking on this line right when he says this that makes him pause, like, and it also just feels natural. It kind of like it's that Tarkovsky touch that you don't just have to have someone talk, you can have something happen. Michael Mann in Thief, there's a scene when James Caan is having coffee with Tuesday Weld, and they take the time to have this happen where he goes to put the cream in, and he's like, waitress, he goes, can I get another cream? She goes, is there something wrong with that? He goes, yeah, there's something wrong with it. He goes, it's cottage cheese. And then he tries to light his cigarette because he's all thrown off and he can't get the lighter to go. So it's like, man, that's that type of moment where it is possible to simulate reality.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, is that, it's one of those moments where it's like, that can't be planned. You couldn't have planned that, right? It's got to be one of those moments where it just happened and you're like,
is it a scene where, is it something that a writer saw at a diner?
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's like someone said that.
Right.
It happened to them, or they did this, and then they it's like, and then you remember to put that in your script. You know, it's like, I'd like to think that it's that.
And then someone reads it and says, what's this about? You can't take that out.
Right. Well, you know, with Altman, when he was directing Beatty on McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Beatty's like, hey man, like why, like everyone's talking at the same, people are talking at the same time. Like the audience isn't going to be able to know what's going on. He's like, isn't that what life is like? You know?
Altman is known for, like, he wanted something else to happen. Like he would just keep doing things and just try to create an atmosphere where something real would happen, and he would just be like, thank God I just got that, you know?
I mean,
that's why he used those wide frames.
There's a painstaking attention to detail in his work, man. I wouldn't be surprised if he loved Tarkovsky.
I'm sure
just because his films didn't necessarily, but there are Altman moments that kind of feel like they're his own brand of simulating reality, you know?
Before we wrap up, I just want to, you know, this was a long time coming for you because of how much you love Tarkovsky and how much I know that. So just a nice memory between us is, it's weird that we've known each other for a long time, but we've been in and out of each other's lives. Like we could, like, almost intersect and then don't, and then we intersect at these moments. And
Right.
you know, you became friends because you worked with Lincoln, and then we're at the comedy club one night, and you're just there, and like we start up this conversation.
Yep.
And it just leads into Tarkovsky. I think I asked you who your favorite director was, and you're like, Tarkovsky. And I'm like, oh my God, Solaris. And like,
Yeah.
you know, they just released this, what's the name of that thing? And you're like, Stalker, it's Stalker. And I don't know. I flash on that a lot because it's like, you know, it was a moment where it's like, oh, we're like two peas in a pod, just the way we talk about movies and the way that we can just, you know, forget what else is going on in the room. It's just about, you know, what films we love and what films we watch.
I mean, when I discovered him, I couldn't believe someone like this existed. It's a different way than I ever felt watching anything. He made me just forget I was watching a movie, and not in an escapism sense, but in an ultra just like inclusive kind of like, he is taking you somewhere.
It's affecting in a very deep, resonant way.
He was special, man. Like, he's special in a sense that transcends cinema. He is one of the most important contributors to art and to just analyzing life and trying to like help us find some meaning to this. I mean, he really is.
He's a poet.
He's missed, man. I mean, he really is one of those guys that you wish was still making films, because I bet you he would have kept. I mean, you know, you'd like to think that like he wouldn't taper off, because it happens so much to people. Like Godard, you got to give it to Godard that he just kept making films, and like Eloge de l'Amour and some of his later films were actually pretty good, and he never really stopped taking chances. He was just like, I'm just gonna keep making my type of film, you know?
I like to think that he would have had, you know, Wim Wenders is one of those filmmakers to me, and you know, like him, he kind of did it his own way, and he has his own way of doing things, and it's sometimes he's hit and miss, and sometimes he does something that's just so bizarre that you don't even know what to make of it. But you know, I feel like then like he kind of, like Werner Herzog too, like, you know, he goes into documentaries and he makes documentaries, and you know, some of them are great documentaries, but he keeps just making hit movies his way. And like, you know, the commercial establishment be damned, like I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna change who I am.
Well, and who knows? Look at the films that Herzog made, and then he ends up directing Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. You know, and it's like, which I still love. It's like, who knows what would have happened if Tarkovsky had kept living, and what he might have been. He was very open to influence and to, you know, doing it not necessarily his way, but in the way he's learning. You know, he never stopped learning.
See Solaris, there's so much there. Have patience, watch the whole thing, you will get something out of it, and then, you know, pour into Tarkovsky's whole oeuvre, because, you know, for me, Ivan's Childhood is a masterpiece, and you've got to see it to believe it. The imagery in that is just some of the most beautiful, haunting imagery you'll ever see, and it's in black and white, which is cool. But no, I got to see The Mirror.
Nostalgia.
Yep. Andrei Rublev.
Yep.
They're all on Filmstruck, by the way.
A lot of them are on Criterion. Andrei Rublev.
Stalker, you got to see Stalker. But he's a great filmmaker, and it's been a pleasure sitting here and watching you write up about him, because
it was a fun one, man. Thank you.
All right. I'm David Metzger.
I'm Devin Ewell.
Thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. Take care.